בצפון.
וואו, באיזה מושב?
שאלה מצוינת. הגעתי עם ווייז. אמרתי, יש דברים שאני לא יודעת. מי קונה את האוכל, מה איפה קנו, כמה אכלו. אני בצפון.
איזה יופי, איזה יופי. את נראית ממש, כמו בת 15, וואו. זה מה שהאוויר עושה, במיוחד אחרי הקורונה, ברוך השם. ותודה שחיכית. ואני, okay, now I'm speaking back in English over here. Okay, and a good thing, because today, as you know, we're continuing with the topic of Tfilah and Tanakh by moving from Sefer Vayikra, where we discussed the nature of Tfilah and Korbanot, and based on really Shmo Parachav Gimel, based on Parshat Mishpatim, now we're going to move to the famous story of Miriam in Sefer Bamidbar. And what's interesting about this story is that
we should dedicate.
I was just going to do this. I was just going to do it, Becky. I said, and speaking about Tfilah and Sefer Bamidbar, especially for Refuah, we're dedicating the shiur le'ilui nishmato she'ela harav Chaim Bena Harava Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky Zachrono Levracha. And my husband actually is on the way to the Levaya right now. And as I'm sure, Baruch Hashem, again, hundreds and thousands are. And Becky, thank you. What we're going to do is basically take a look then at Tfilah and Sefer Bamidbar, and then Be'ezrat Hashem. Next week, we're going to conclude with a Tfilah and Sefer Dvarim. And by this, I'm referring really to Moshe Rabbeinu's personal Tfilah. And we're going to see an interesting transformation today in Sefer Bamidbar. And then, Be'ezrat Hashem, have a special pre-Pesach Tfilah shiur. And then after Pesach, we're going to be focusing on Tfilah in Nevi'im and Ketuvim. So that basically is going to help us appreciate a general development of the nature of Tfilah. Now, speaking about the nature of Tfilah, we already discussed how in Shmot, by the story of Chet Egel, that's where we saw how HaKadosh Baruch Hu teaches Moshe Rabbeinu the art of Tfilah, the art of prayer, by basically, as Chazal tell us, wrapping himself up as a Shaliach Tzibur, literally teaching Moshe Tfilah. Now, this is interesting because we said, wait a second, isn't Tfilah something that Rabbi Yosef bar Rabbi Chanina says, Avot Tikanum? Why does Moshe have to be taught the art of Tfilah if the Avot already know Tfilah? What's interesting is we said, number one, that what Moshe Rabbeinu learns from Hashem directly are the Yugimul Mitzvot Rachamim, literally a nusach of Tfilah, a nusach of Rachamim, number one, but also that idea of being able to turn to Hashem, not just be'et tzara, but being able to turn to Hashem on a national level. So one could argue that that really is the chidush of the tefillah of Yigimul Mitzvot Rachamim, that we're not speaking, obviously, every individual. And what's interesting is that we see that it wasn't just the avot, meaning tefillah, and you notice looking around at other nations as well, there's no atheist in a foxhole. Everyone prays. Everyone, if you feel that there's a relationship with some God or even some gods, of course you're going to turn to that God, not just in sacrifice, but you're going to talk to that God. And what's amazing is that on a national level, to believe that tefillah can actually be a means not only of strengthening your relationship, but changing the gezerah. That's exactly the point of that national tefillah. Now, we've also discussed numerous times how that doesn't necessarily mean that every tefillah is answered the way that we want it to be answered. That does mean, though, that every tefillah strengthens our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, when Chazal talk about, no tefillah goes unanswered, it doesn't necessarily mean your tefillah. It doesn't necessarily mean that what you ask for is going to be answered. It means that there's now a stronger relationship between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it also means that your tefillah then, because of that relationship, may actually help someone else in Am Yisrael, or may even be there, to help your great-grandchild years from now. And that's what it means, that for every tefillah, of course, a tefillah strengthens your relationship. I think about this all the time when it comes to conversations that we have between people, that every conversation should strengthen a relationship. Every communication, every aspect, again, it really alters the relationship. Obviously, ideally in a very positive way. So with this in mind, We now open up Sefer Bamidbar, and we're going to see such a fascinating transformation in Sefer Bamidbar. So what we're going to do is really just look at the psukim themselves, and we're going to see what's going on within the psukim. And therefore, instead of just focusing, because we did have a shiur on Miriam and the nature of Tsmila, I'd like instead to show you from the text itself. So I'm going to turn to the text together with you in order to bring this to life. Here we go. And we're going to begin actually with the beginning of Bamidbar. And when Israel, here we go, when we first leave. Okay, so back here. Okay, let's take a look at these psukim that we're all very familiar with. And this is right after Vayi ben Salah Aron, Vayomer Moshe, Kuma Hashem ve'yafutu oivecha ve'yanusum misanecha mipanecha. Right after Moshe has told Chovav, if you remember, Tov, 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 come with us, ve'hitafta lanu, ve'hitiv Hashem mimcha, and if you go with us, things are going to be good, good, good. Then we have Keneged, the 5 times that Tov is mentioned, Vayam kimetonim ra. We have all this ra and tave ra, right? The people are, as Rashi says, looking back, it's clear that they were like a tinok haborech mi beit hasefer. That instead of looking forward to where they were going, they were simply running away from responsibility, because you see that stage number 1 is they're just mitoninim ra ba'aznei Hashem. They're kvetching, they're complaining. You know, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And secondly, the next story, as we know, is a story of mi yachilenu basar. It's not we want meat, it's who's going to feed us meat. We don't want to be dependent on Hashem to provide us every day. We want to go to Rami Levi and stock up for 2 weeks. And whereas the man requires that we are completely reliant on HaKadosh Baruch Hu every single day, we don't want that. We'd rather have kishuim, mavatichim. We'd rather have vegetables that just pop up on their own. Once again, it's about a story of emunah. Now, if you remember, Moshe Rabbeinu responds to this by saying, and he realizes it's not about meat. It's lo chal anochi lebadi laset et kol ha'am hazeh ki kaved mimeni v'em kacha toseh li hargeni naharog v'al ereh berati. Hashem, please, again, kill me instead of letting me see berati. Now, what's ra about Moshe Rabbeinu? He basically feels that he's not having any leadership effect on the spiritual aspect of the people, which is why Hashem first answers him by giving him Shivim Ish Miziknei Yisrael. Now, this is important because Chazal link this story to the next story, which we're going to see is really a story not necessarily about Nevu'ah in as much as Tefillah. And you'll see what I mean by that coming up in just a minute. So Hashem first says that they're going to be Zakenim. And the point of these Zakenim is, as Vali Shivim Ish Miziknei Yisrael, meaning take people who are ready and already considered Ziknei Yisrael, meaning they're already recognized within Am Yisrael, and they're already, I was going to say, esteemed and respected within Am Yisrael, and they're going to be the ones that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to inspire. Well, with that in mind, and first Hashem says, okay, I am going to expand your realm of influence. There will be greater mashpi'im, right? In Chassidut, mashpi'a is exactly someone like this, someone who can strengthen someone religiously. Today in the internet, the mashpi'a, the influencers, influence in all different strange ways. But what we do see is that Hashem says, okay, Moshe Rabbeinu, we're going to expand your mode of influence, but at the same time, you have to realize that it really is not just about your chinuch, your religious chinuch. It's also about their relationship with me, that they don't want to be dependent on me. And therefore, I'm going to give them slav. And we'll see. The ones who take up to 30 days worth, they'll survive. In other words, they're still going to be dependent on me. The one who take 30 days worth or more, that means that they really don't want me in their lives. Those are going to be the ones that are going to be killed, right? That's the story of the Slav. Now, take a look at what happens right after that. Perek Yud Bet. ותדבר מרים ואהרון במשה על אודות האישה הכושית אשר לקח כי אישה כושית לקח. And it's true that this is the basis of numerous parshanut, of exegesis with regard to who is this woman? Is this a second wife that Moshe Rabbeinu took, an isha kushit atop of Tzipora? Or is this a reference to Tzipora? In which case, why do we have to know if Moshe Rabbeinu is practicing monogamy or bigamy? Or maybe it means asher lakach, that he had taken her, but now he divorced her. So what's going on over here? The pshat is the basic idea that Miriam and Aaron are speaking about Moshe's personal life as if he is, their next door neighbor. Moshe bought a carton of milk because Moshe bought a carton of milk. Meaning you don't talk about Moshe Rabbeinu that way. And obviously, Chazal tell us, for that matter, you don't speak about anyone this way. Vayamru harak ach b'Moshe. Is it only with Moshe? Look carefully. Diber Hashem. Is it only with Moshe that Hashem speaks? Halo gam banu diber. Now it makes sense that this comes right after Perek Yud Aleph. Chazal say that's why they're talking about the Isha Kushit, because Tzipora, they had overheard Miriam overheard Tzipora say, "Wow, I feel bad for all these wives of the 70 men. We just had the story of Eldad Umeda mitznavim b'machane," and Miriam overhears this and says, "What do you mean?" And Tzipora says, "Yes, Moshe Rabbeinu divorced me," and especially in Midrashic literature, where Miriam is the one responsible for getting her mother and father back together after they were divorced from each other, and henceforth Moshe Rabbeinu was born, you can imagine how this is going to bother her. But let's put the Midrash aside just for a minute and try to appreciate, even from the terminology, the very fact that the Milah Mancha in these first 12 psukim is going to be the word diber, 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 tells us everything we need to know. It's really about communication between Hashem and Nevi'im, and for that matter, also Nevi'im and Hashem. Basically, Miriam and Aron are wondering, why do you need to expand the sphere of influence to 70 Zakinim? After all, Halo Gambanu Diber, how about us? Meaning it's not just Moshe Rabbeinu alone, it's a triumvirate. And the whole idea, though, is that they're wondering, Halo Gambanu Diber. Don't people realize that we're also here and that Hashem communicates with us? Now, what we're going to see is something remarkable, and that is that their whole basis, their foundation, is that what constitutes a Navi is someone with whom Hashem communicates, right? This is a fascinating idea. It's someone that Hashem talks to. And the reason I say that is because let's take a look at what happens. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't say anything, even though he overhears this, because he's a Nav. And he doesn't want to explain to them something beyond that, which is Dibur is not a one-sided idea. It's two-sided. And we're going to see something phenomenal. As I mentioned, not about Nevuah, also about Nevuah, but even more so about Tsmila. Vayam Hashem pitom al Moshe ve'al Aron ve'al Miriam, tz'u shlochtechem al Ohel Moed, vayitzu shloshtam. Right? Hashem puts them all in the same boat, so to speak. All of you come right now to Ohel Moed and wait in Ohel Moed. And that's exactly it. This seems to corroborate what Miriam and Aron were feeling. You see, Hashem talks to all three of us. Vayeret Hashem b'amud anan. And Hashem calls them out. Listen to my dibur. Now, so far, everything seems okay because that's exactly what they explained. Hashem speaks to us. So Hashem says, okay, so I want you to hear what I have to say. I want you, Gana, to hear my dibur. And I'm sure that Miriam and Aron are thinking, okay, Hashem, here we are, because you do communicate with us. Im yeh neviachem, Hashem, b'mar'a elav etvada, b'chalom adaber bo. Basically, he explains to them that what does it constitute to be a Navi? Hashem appears to them in a mar'eh, which we know is a clear image, what is generally called an aspaklaria hami'ira, or not just called an aspaklaria hami'ira, but also a mar'eh. The Rambam explains means that you're in an alert state of nevuah, that you realize, oh my gosh, Hashem is coming to me right now, or a chalom. A chalom is an aspaklaria she'ina mi'ira, is not as clear, explain Chazal, and it's also more in a sleepy state, meaning it's a very potent dream, but which is actually nevuah. So right now, one can argue that there aren't necessarily chidushim with regard to what Hashem is divulging to Miriam and Aron. Basically, Hashem is saying, you know that I come to you in the form of dibur. Well, this is the form of dibur. But then Hashem explains, Lo chen abdi Moshe b'chol beiti ne'emanhu. But that's what you don't understand about Moshe. Take a look at this. Pe el pe adaber bo. Now, we're used to thinking pe el pe means, or is really defining a more intimate level of a relationship between Hashem and Moshe. You see me and I'm mar'eh. right? But what does that mean? Now we understand it really is about Tsmila. Hashem is explaining, you're all Nevi'im, it's true, but Moshe is a Nevi on a different level. What does that mean? Pe el peh daber bo. What does it mean it's more intimate? Take a look at the terminology that's used here. Hashem says, Shimuna dvarai. Again, Hashem b'mareh elav etvada. There is a mareh. In other words, I communicate with you through vision and through speaking with you. B'chalom adaber bo. Even when there isn't a clear vision, I speak with a Navi. What's unique about Moshe is that pe el peh adaber bo, is that Moshe Rabbeinu can also speak with me. Everyone's saying, meaning pe el peh. How is that really different than mar'eh? How is that different than chalom? That we have a mouth-to-mouth relationship. What does it mean, a mouth-to-mouth versus a vision? It's almost as if, when I tell people, and this is very true, that I don't actually like talking on the phone in as much as actually speaking in person and communicating with a person in person, right? Where I can see them panim al panim. And we know that that terminology is employed in Tanakh as well, that there is a panim al panim relationship between Hashem and Hashem and Moshe Rabbeinu. But that's not what's being depicted, meaning if Hashem really wanted to say, okay, Moshe Rabbeinu sees things even super clear, then he could have said panim al panim. But here it's pe el peh adaber bo. Pe el peh means that it's mouth to mouth. In other words, I don't just speak to Moshe, Moshe speaks with me. And that's how it's different. And omareh v'lo b'chidot utmunat Hashem yabit. In other words, Hashem says, and Moshe, I speak to amareh v'lo b'chidot, meaning it's super clear, utmunat Hashem yabit. He sees God directly. But to a certain degree, that's more or less what a Navi can experience, right? A high level of ma'areh or tmunat Hashem yabit. The chidush is pe el peh adaber bo. I don't just speak ito, imo, adaber bo. I speak literally within him. In other words, there's communication that works both ways. And that's a pe el peh. What Hashem is explaining to Aron and Miriam is that your nevuah is different than that of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, I don't just speak to him like a Navi, rather, he speaks with me. In other words, what added quality does Moshe Rabbeinu have that Miriam and Aron do not experience? Moshe knows the art of Tsmila. Hashem is saying, Moshe also speaks with me. Umadwa lo yaritam ledaber b'abdi b'Moshe. Vayicharach Hashem bam vayelach. And therefore, you not understanding that, now we appreciate the story so much more. And we're wondering, really, that's not fair. Why do you punish, Miriam and Aron so terribly? And the answer is, it's not a punishment. Let's take a look. Hashem says, that means that story in Sefer Shemot, which we know, by the way, is just a few months earlier, right? It's basically about a year earlier. And Hashem says, you didn't get that message. You didn't get the message that Moshe can communicate with me, that Moshe can say, Hashem kal rachum v'chanun. You really didn't understand that. And therefore, I have to make sure that you get that message. How am I going to do that? I'm going to put you in a position where, of course, you're going to get that message. Let's take a look. Right? This is what we talk about in general, about consequences versus just punishments. Otherwise, it seems that Hashem is saying, shame on you for speaking Lashon Hara. Now you get zarat. It's more than that. Hashem is saying, you don't know the art of Tsmila that a Navi ultimately is going to have, but right now it's only in the hands of Moshe Rabbeinu. So I'm going to teach you the art of Tsmila that Moshe Rabbeinu has, that is going to serve really as a basis of nevuah for future generations. And this is a remarkable idea. Miriam mitzorat kasheleg. And I think we discussed this in the past. I want to quickly review why mitzorat kasheleg. So there are all different opinions. They spoke about the Isha Kushit, who was very dark and black. So Mida connected Mida. Miriam is going to turn albino. She's going to turn white. Again, the idea of vatzarat for Lashon Hara, but that's a little difficult because we actually learn about that from this scene. So it's difficult to appreciate it just from this scene alone, because this is going to establish the idea of tzarat coming for Lashon Hara, and it will be corroborated in Sefer Dvarim. So what does it mean, V'nei Miriam mitzorat kasheleg? Basically, what we see from here is that, wait, who was the last person to get tzarat? And the answer is Moshe Rabbeinu back in Sefer Shemot Perek Gimel, and where we saw that there were three different signs that Moshe Rabbeinu was given in order for him to instill emunah that Hashem had spoken with him. Do you remember that? Again, and what were they? And this is phenomenal. The first one was his staff was going to turn into a snake, and then back to that. Shalom, shalom, ma shlomech Hila. Esther, so Esther, ma shlomech. Metzuyan, Shavua Tov. And now, Gana, that was number one. Number two, we see that there is, and by the way, it wasn't just Moshe who did that. Aron is going to do something very similar as his staff turns into a tanin, if you recall. So we have Moshe's staff turning into a tanin, and Aaron's staff turning into a tanin, just like Moshe Rabbeinu, and then it turns back into a staff. Okay, and then came the sign of Tzarat. We're not. Take a look at what's different about this. Moshe's told, put your hands inside your chest. It comes out, it's Tzarat, it's leprous, or whatever this disease of Tzarat is. He puts it back in his chest, and it comes out, and it's now bari, basar bari. Right now, all of a sudden, it's healthy skin again. Oh, because he put it in and he put it out. Okay, the third sign is, and this is interesting, is that the water changes to blood. Now we know that, again, it wasn't just Moshe who did this. Aron also casts his arms over all the seas of Egypt, and they all turn to blood. And similarly, Miriam, we know, is going to do many miracles by the water, or at least observe the miracles by the water. Now, if you look carefully at the difference between these three signs, it's very evident. Firstly, the staff again turns into a snake, and then the snake turns back into a staff. So too, Moshe's healthy hand turns mitzorah, kasheleg, and then turns back to healthy. Whereas the water turns into blood, we don't find that it turns back into water again, which is interesting. But we see the whole idea of Tzarat as well is that as opposed to a staff turning into a snake, which is a transformation of the nature of that staff, what's interesting about the hand is that it's Moshe's hand. It's not like the hand turns into a head, meaning the hand is still a hand. It's just the nature of the hand changes. And this, as we know, is the first time that we see a physiological phenomenon, right? In the Yetziat Mitzrayim story is also evidence in future makot, meaning some are going to transform the actual item. Again, like makatam. Again, but something like Svardeya and Kinim and Arov, those are going to be much more like Tzarat, right? Basically changing things, even Dever, right? Pestilence, right? The idea of plagues and pandemics and sicknesses. So what's interesting is that these three signs are also going to serve as heralding different ways that Hashem interacts within the world. But back to our Tzarat case, we said that Aron had fulfilled both the sign of the staff and the snake and the sign of the water and the blood. But he did not perform Tzarat. He had no experience in transforming a diseased hand into another hand. Now, this is also fascinating because in Sefer Vayikra, we've already learned that who's going to be the one to diagnose Tzarat? A Kohen. And therefore, Aron could think at this point that, oh, wow, it's so cool. I determine when Tzarat is Tzarat. Tzarat is not determined by whether or not you have marks on your skin. It's determined when the Kohen says that you're Tamei. Ulahorot biyom hatamei v'yom hatahor zo Torah Tzarat. And it's the Kohen who accompanies the mitzorah through the process of purification. And therefore, he's the one who ultimately diagnoses whether or not he's healthy again, whether or not he has to re-quarantine, by the way, right? This is all in the hands of the Kohen. So Aron could think that he does have some control over Tzarat. Miriam now becomes Mitzorat Kasheleg. And therefore, people always ask, that's not fair. Miriam is punished and Aron gets away with, just witnessing it. No, this message is really, again, a consequence for both of them. Okay, Miriam, you have Tzarat. Aron, who thinks that he can be the one to diagnose Tzarat and basically determine when one is cured of Tzarat, he can't do anything right now. He doesn't actually cure it. He just diagnoses it. Vayifein Aron el Miriam, and the Cheskuni and Sforno explain that you also can't be cured by the Kohen who diagnoses you if they're related to you. Because all the Kohanim right now are related to Miriam. It's only Aron, Elazar, and Itamar, which means that she's going to say Mitzorat for life. And that's why Vifen Aron el Miriam, Vihine Mitzorat. He knows what Sarat is. He already underwent his stage in Sarat from Sefer Vayikra. And Aron realizes, wait a second, that's what it's about. We can change it. And we are Nevi'im. We can see with our eyes, but we can communicate the way that Moshe can. We are passive recipients of the communication of Hashem. That's what Hashem was trying to say. But Hashem was saying, Pe'el pa daber bo. But Moshe is the only one who can talk back to Hashem. And that's why Aron turns to Moshe, Bi Adoni, ana tashit aleinu chatash asher no anu v'asher chatanu. We sinned by not appreciating, everyone ready for this? Not nevuah, but we didn't appreciate Tsmila. Miriam is part of your mother's womb. And she is your sister. She's half of your body, of your flesh. Vayitzak Moshe el Hashem. And this is so powerful because it doesn't say Vayitpalel Moshe, it says Vayitzak. That Moshe burst forth to Hashem lemor, Elna Refana La. That this is where we see the term of Elna Refana La, the shortest tefillah ever in Tanakh, and yet perhaps the most powerful, because this is the first time that we find the tefillah since Chet HaEgel, since the Yegimel Mitot Rachamim. This is a beautiful, beautiful idea that Moshe Rabbeinu is basically on his own, and this corroborates that he's Anav Ma'od Mikol Adam Asher Pnei Hadama. He could have told Miriam and Aron, oh, really? Meaning you experience nevuah like I do? Okay, let's all talk back to Hashem. Let's see if Hashem listens to what you have to say, but he doesn't. But when he needs to, Vayitzak Moshe el Hashem, that's part of Anava. Moshe knows exactly that he has this power. And basically it says he only uses this power when he needs this power. And when does he use it? Vayitzak, it comes out in a stark way, as we know so many tefillot do under pressing circumstances, right? This is a tza'aka. One can even say Gdola Umar Elna Rifbanala. Hashem, I'm going to say 5 words. And sure enough, ויאמר שם למשה, ואביה ירוק ירוק בפניה, לא תקלם 7 ימים, תיסגר 7 ימים מחוץ למחנה, ותיסגר מרים מחוץ למחנה 7 ימים. והעם לא נסע Safe Miriam, which teaches us that what happened as soon as Moshe said, Elna Rafanala, she was healed. How do we know that? Because then Hashem tells Moshe, but she's still embarrassed. She still spat in her father's face. Again, basically saying, wait, spat in Hashem's face, Moshe's face. The commentaries disagree because she basically insulted the nature of tefillah, which is an insult both to the mitpalel and to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore he says, okay, she still needs the 7 days of quarantine. Wait, but she only gets 7 days once she's healed, right? You need another 7 days before you come back to the machane, which means that she was healed immediately. So Moshe's tefillah has immediate effects over here, teaching us this nature. Now, please keep this in mind, that it's specifically through this story then that we see tefillah, again, not just on a national level, but now we see tefillah. One can argue the tefillah like the tefillah of the Avot on a very personal level, but it's even stronger in the sense that here our appreciation is that it's a form of nevuah. Everyone see that? Tefillah is really like nevuah. Yes.
How come Moshe has to daven for her? How come she doesn't daven for herself?
That's exactly it, because she realizes she can't. That Moshe Rabbeinu, for now, and indeed that's exactly the transition of this year, that for now, and that the nature of tefillah is an expression of nevuah that only Moshe Rabbeinu has. Right? Aron doesn't have it, which means that not everyone can daven. Again, only particular people can daven right now, which is why we have to continue this series of shiurim to see when do Am Yisrael get this art of tefillah. So don't worry, we're going to see it already today. And the idea of tefillah being like nevuah. Now, what's interesting is that Rav Soloveitchik actually states this explicitly when he talks about, and he has a whole essay called Talmud Torah, Tefillah, and Redemption. And at first he says that Talmud Torah is different than tefillah, and that tefillah is more of a soliloquy, more of a monologue with Hashem. And Talmud Torah, meaning tefillah, I talk to God. Talmud Torah, Hashem talks to me. And then he says, actually, after Nevuah, Tsmila replaced Nevuah. Wait, but Nevuah isn't just, right? Tefillah, I thought, is me talking to God. And Nevuah is Hashem talking to me. So basically he says, like the story, that Tefillah is really a form of Nevuah. That if you listen carefully enough, you'll realize that Tefillah replaced Nevuah in the sense of serving as a mode of communication between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now he explains it in very broad terms, but Rav Nachman explains it even more. So this is what I want you to see now as well. 1 second, I'm going to bring this up. There we go. Okay. I think it's here. Okay, sorry, 1 minute. Here we go. Okay, it should be here. Just looking for this Rav Nachman. Okay, and what's interesting is that the Ramban says this, again, very clearly, by the way, already in Shemot Perek Gimel, he talks about, again, the nature already then of Moshe serving not only as someone that Hashem can talk to, but someone that can talk to Hashem, right? That he's part of that experience. And Hashem wanted him to, part of the reason why he had to experience this physically is in order for him to internalize these messages, not just of what Nevuah is, but actually what, there you go. Okay. I think this is where it is in Rav Nachman, but yeah, here it is. Okay, I'm going to pull it up right now. Okay, he says it in Sod Yesharim. Okay, in Sod Yesharim, and just trying to pull up the original, but basically, again, the idea of, according to the Ramban, Moshe Rabbeinu internalizing this experience of knowing that he could change the physiology by having this relationship with Hashem. And that was essential for teaching Am Yisrael, again, what these otot are, that having a relationship with Hashem doesn't just mean that Hashem speaks with you, but it means even then that that you can speak with Hashem. And that's why Rav Nachman also states beautifully that when one davens around nature, one has a greater understanding of a relationship with God. And what does that mean? Because nature, as we know, is a way that Hashem also speaks to us. So that's why, here we go, we see this also, Vadam Ayin Lavodet Hadama, that was part of the initial idea of, and here we go, this was the initial idea of what Tfilah is, which is why Rashi says that Hashem waited for man to be the one to daven for rain, because that's what it means to really, again, to appreciate a relationship with God, that you could also ask Hashem for something. So real Tfilah is exactly this. Again, the understanding of a relationship expressed through not just you talking to God, but God talking to you. And, okay. Here, the Rav Nachman is not coming up, but I will show you also the Ramban. The Ramban says that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu waits for us to daven, so you can appreciate that the Tovah comes from Hashem. And the Baal Sefer HaChinuch also talks about Hoda'ah being this way, that's why we have to thank Hashem as part of our Tfilah. And it's not just us talking to God, but Hashem bestowing things upon us, and Hoda'ah is a recognition of that. So I am going to, I'm just going to bring this back up again. And I see Bella saying, Hakoch litpalel al ha'acher. We also learned from this. But the truth is that we learned that also from Sefer Shemot, because that's when Moshe Rabbeinu was davening for the entire nation. So just for a moment, back to our, and here we go, back to our psukim that we're going to see. I just want you to appreciate this inside. So here we go. Again, back to these psukim, the nature right now of Nevuah is described not just as something that manifests itself in God speaking b'mar'eh, but rather peh el peh. That part of what's unique about Moshe Rabbeinu is that he can actually communicate with Hashem, and as opposed to as opposed to what we see by Aron and Miriam, who are the passive recipients of Hashem's communication. Moshe is an active recipient and an active responder. He can talk to God. Now, this is really remarkable, and Hinzi's right. Right now, Miriam and Aron can't do that. Moshe is the only one who has this special power of talking to Hashem. The question is, when does this change? Everyone ready for this? I love this. And let's fast forward right now to Perek Chaf in Sefer Bamidbar, right? Everyone sees this, right? Did Perek Chaf come up for everyone? Yes, excellent. Again, do you remember this? Yes.
One reason why I just would think that right now Miriam could not daven for herself anyways is because she used her mouth for Lashon Hara. How could she use it for Tfilah?
Yafeh, that's a beautiful, beautiful idea. But then the question is, how about Aron? Aron didn't speak, right? Chazal say he listened. So why can't Aron daven?
But
right?
she used her mouth with her.
Okay, Yafeh, meaning his mouth is defiled from her speaking Lashon Hara. Okay, Yafeh, but I think it's even more powerful. And we're going to prove it right now, that it started with this Aron and Miriam story with Moshe. Now take a look at what happens. Do you remember Bamidbar Perek Chaf? Fast forward 38 years, Miriam dies, right, in Kadesh, and she's buried there. And there isn't mayim for the people. There's no water, right? So the people come to complain to Moshe and Aron. And however you want to see the sin of Mei Meriva, they both sinned, right? How do you know that they both sinned? Because let's take a look. Hashem speaks to them. Again, this is right after Vayim Hashem Moshe ve'el Aharon, yan lo he'emantem bi lahaktisheni le'inei b'nei Yisrael. You did not display enough emunah in me to sanctify me. And there are all different explanations. The Ramban says because they said Hamanasela zenotzi lachem, meaning all different possibilities. Nonetheless, you're both punished for a lack of emunah. That's really what it is, a lack of emunah. And we're going to see a lack of emunah basically in Tfilah, a lack of emunah in this relationship. Again, let's prove it right now. So this came because Miriam died, and now Moshe and Aron are both, they both did something wrong here. This is Mei Meriva asher ravu b'nei Yisrael tashem b'yikadesh bam, and now they're told that they're not going into lo taviu et hakal hazel aretz asher natati lahem, that they're not going to be brought into the land. Now take a look at what happens. Again, now we see something very sad. Moshe sends messengers to the king of Edom. Please, can we pass through your aretz? We're not going to go through the actual land. Just please sell us even your water sources. And Moshe's answer comes back, lo. Lo ta'avor, so much so that Edom comes out to fight against them. And next thing we know, then Aron dies, right? This is so sad, this death of Aron, right? That reminds us really of, of Kanievsky, the tragedy on one hand, but the beauty of seeing his legacy living on in the next generation. But still very sad. Miriam died, Aron died. Now it's Moshe Rabbeinu alone. Take a look at Perek Chaf Aleph. This is right after the story. Again, let's take a look here. Okay, we're the very next parak. Vayishma HaKnani Melech Arad. So not only is Moshe's request, it is answered negatively, then we find that they're attacked by the Knanim and as we see, Vayishmi Menu Shebi, and prisoners of war taken, and Am Yisrael go and fight against them. And this is where we see that Am Yisrael fight and they accept a neder on their own, right? For the first time, Am Yisrael are displaying independence, positive independence. And we'll prove it right now, right? Keeping in mind as well that they don't have their same dependency on leadership because Miriam and Aron are already gone. Here comes an amazing story. Vayisu mehor hahar, right? The Torah is telling you Aron isn't there. He was buried at Hor Hahar. Derech Yamsuf l'svov et Eretz Edom. But Tiksar nefesh ha'am b'derech. That's not new. This reminds us of the very beginning of Perek Aleph, which is how we began our shir today. The people are once again, they're anxious. Vayidaber ha'am b'elokim uvu Moshe. Lama helitunu miMitzrayim lamut b'midbar. Now this is the first time, and you get the chills, that the people aren't just talking to Moshe about God. They're talking by Vayidaber ha'am be'elokim uvu Moshe. They're talking about God and about Moshe, right? So they're putting the two together. Why did you take us out of Mitzrayim to kill us in the Midbar? We don't have lechem and mayim v'nafshinu katzah b'lechem hakokel. Now here's the irony, because they do have food. They have the man, and they themselves say it. They just don't want the man. Wait, that's how the story started. Remember with mi achilenu? Oh my gosh, we're back with the original signs. Right now, take a look at this. We just had Mei Meriva. We just had miraculous water. Now there are nechashim. We're back with those three signs, but everything is much more natural now, right? These are the serpents of the desert. This time, the people on their own realize, oh my gosh, we have sinned. Why? Look at what they realized. Remember that Milah Mancha and Parak Yud Bet in the Miriam story of Dibur be'elokim uva Moshe. Am Yisrael spoke Lashon Hara about God and Moshe. As we said, not to Hashem. They spoke about Moshe, about Elokim. Why did you take us out of Mitzrayim? We're so tired of the manna. And now they turn to Moshe and they say, we did something wrong. The last time we saw that was by Aron and Miriam, who said, Asher no alnu vasher chatanu. And they say, Ki dibarnu b'Hashem. Basically, they recognize what they did wrong. They recognize that, oh my gosh, Miriam and Aron did the exact same thing, Moshe. They spoke badly about you because they didn't understand that you have a special power. You have a power of nevuah that goes hand in hand with tefillah. Take a look at this. Ki dibarnu b'Hashem ubach hitpalel el Hashem. Vayasar malenu et hanachash. Vayitpalel Moshe va'ad ha'am. And I have the chills. Everyone see what's going on here? The people on their own recognize what Hashem needed them to recognize, which is that Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah is different than anyone's nevuah. It's different than the Shivimish, different than Miriam and Aron's, in that Moshe can talk to God. And what's amazing is that in the Miriam and Aron story, which was about basically Sara'at, right? We said one of the three original signs, and they didn't get it. Hashem had to show them, okay, through Sara'at, you realize you don't have this power. Only Moshe did this oath. Moshe has the power to daven. Miriam and Aron say, Asher no alnu vasher chatanu. And Moshe says, okay, so now I'm going to daven. Vayit'ak, right? He basically is screaming. He says, you realize what a pet-el-pet relationship is? Take a look at this amazing story. After a snake story, after a water story, basically we have a pseudo-tsarat story. The people recognize on their own chatanu. This is reliving that Aron and Miriam scene of Parak Yud Bet. Dibarnu b'Hashem ubach, the exact same term. Hitpalel el Hashem. So Moshe, just like you did there, we get it. You have a pet-el-pet relationship. You know the art of tefillah. You're a different type of navi. Daven to Hashem. Vayitpalel Moshe ba'ad ha'am. And Moshe davens. And take a look at what Hashem says. Vayamar Hashem al Moshe, aseh l'chasara, v'semoto al nes, vayakon nashuch, v'ra'oto b'chai, vayas Moshe nachash nachoshet, v'yisimeo al hanes. Now, why did Hashem just heal them right away? Instead, he told Moshe, okay, this is what you have to do now. You have to take a copper snake and put it on a banner, and whoever looks, v'yibit al nachash nachoshet v'chai. Only those who look at it. Basically, Hashem is saying that sign of the snake on the staff is supposed to remind them that, yes, a snake can turn into a staff, and a staff can turn into a snake, but it's about tefillah. Now, what's amazing over here? Everyone ready for this? So, Hinti, this is going to answer your question. The people realize Moshe has a special power. He can talk to God. But what's amazing is that when Moshe did speak to God here, Hashem answered him by saying, okay, you do something, Moshe, but actually the people have to do something. They have to look at the nachash hanachoshet v'chai. They have to remember that Hashem has this power to transform sickness into life. People who were poisoned by a snake who can now live. And then, here it comes. Again, then the people keep going and going, and they get to a place called Be'irah. And this is where Hashem tells Moshe, Esof eta'am v'tna lehem mayim. Az yashir Yisrael et hashira hazot. What's amazing here? That now Yisrael has learned the art of tefillah, but a different type of tefillah. as opposed to as Yashir Moshe Uvnei Yisrael Tashir Hazot. What do Bnei Yisrael realize in this story? Moshe Rabbeinu teaches them, you know, the art that I've had of Tsmila? Well, guess what? I'm sharing it with you. Hashem says, I'm not going to heal them right away. Show Bnei Yisrael that they could also do this. That when they remember the nachash and the staff, basically, they'll remember that Hashem has his power. All they have to do is turn to me and they'll live. Turn to me. And Am Yisrael realize it's not just about turning. It's about opening up our mouths and singing to Hashem. So the same art that Moshe had, as Yashir Moshe Uvnei Yisrael Tashir Hazot, that same art that Moshe had even before Chita Egel and Yugamol Mitot Rachamim. Moshe could open up his mouth and sing a song of Shira to Hashem. Am Yisrael were probably thinking, like, who are we to be able to communicate with God? And they realize, oh my gosh, we can communicate with God. This is exactly the same context. Again, it's an Aron and Miriam story in the background. They're gone. Moshe Rabbeinu realizes they're not going to have me anymore. He teaches them that they can play a role in Tfilah. He teaches them that they can daven and should daven. And really, what's the first Tfilah? What's the first communication that comes out of their mouth? Not a bakasha, but instead a shira, a hodaya. Ali be'er enula, be'er chaforo asarim, karua nedive'am, b'mchokek b'meshanotam, u'mimbar matana, u'mimatana nachliel, minachliel bamot, u'b'bamot hagai, asher b'ste mo'av rosh hapeskat, nishkafa al pnei hayishimon. They see their future, and they realize that they're going to have this art as well, that they're going to be able to communicate directly with Hashem, even without having Moshe there. Now, what we're going to see is that this does not dismiss the nature of Tfilah of a Navi. The Tfilah of a Navi is still going to be more powerful, let's say, than the Tfilah of Am Yisrael, because there is a closer, more intense relationship. But this is the transformation of the Tfilah that Aron and Miriam learned, that Moshe Rabbeinu has, to Am Yisrael learning that Moshe has this art and then employing it on their own. So yes, Hindi, I hope that answered the question then.
It did, but now I also understand why, when it came to him hitting the rock, why he got punished more, because I feel like at the time that he needed to speak to the rock instead of hit the rock is right after Miriam died. And I feel like when they lost the water from her dying, it could have been a slippery slope that they thought maybe the water came from her. But by him speaking to the rock and davening and turning to Hashem in that power, that was like the moment that he needed to show them it was coming from Hashem by speaking and davening and turning to him.
Beautiful, beautiful. And now that's, I think, what Rashi is alluding to when he says, again, now we know he did speak something to the rock. He didn't speak the art of Tfilah. He had the power already by the rock to teach them about Tfilah. And he, just like you're saying, unfortunately, he gave up that experience, right? He forfeited that teaching opportunity of teaching them the power of words, the power of Tfilah by the rock. So instead instead of water, it came to the sign of the snake, through which they finally learned that message. That's an excellent point. Excellent point. Beautiful. So next week, we're going to see then, if by the end of Sefer Bamidbar, Am Yisrael know that they can open up their mouths and sing a shira to Hashem, even in the absence of Miriam and the absence of Moshe and Aron, then we're going to take a look at Moshe Rabbeinu's last tefillah. And I'm going to say also his last will and testament to Am Yisrael, making sure that they appreciate the nature, not just of the potential communication, but that they understand the nature of the mitzvah of tefillah. So that's what we're going to conclude with Be'ezrat Hashem next week. So in the meantime, wishing you all a Shavua Tov u'Mevorach.
Shavua Tov, toda rabba.
Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
Well, enjoy.
Toda, Sde Eliezer, I remembered where we are.